Good morning, everyone. This is Brett Simon. Caught me having a sip of coffee there. Okay, so I thought I'd jump online to take some questions from any of you that have any questions. As has become a tradition over the last couple of years, start off with DV 2020 and 21. No news on the appeal. So we just have to continue to wait. Other news, we're about 2 months away from DV 2025 results. And that does change things a little bit for DV 2024 because KCC in early May will start to have to dedicate some of their resources to the DS260s from various countries around the world, right? So what they generally do is they make sure that they've completed processing of the DS260s well in advance of May. So even though this year has been a lot of work for KCC in processing DS260s, I'm sure they are planning to finish those by by April at the very latest, right? So I would have hoped they would be finished those by March, which means nobody else should be waiting for their DS260 to process. Okay, so fingers crossed. So someone's booked their flight, Morning Hope Breaker. So you've booked your flight already. Congratulations, that's exciting. What's the situation for Asia? Is it normal? Yeah, it's normal. What do you think is abnormal about it? If you look at the number of visas being issued, it's perfectly on track. So it's just not a problem. What do you expect the FB will reach this month? I don't have a prediction for the month to month. I can tell you that there are some embassies that have high performing embassies that have not managed to reach the numbers, for example, that are already current. And that when that happens, it means that they've got to do some catch up. And let's say there were, just for example, let's say a region has 1,000 slots available, capacity for new interviews. If they're playing catch up on numbers that are already current, and maybe let's say 500 slots go to cases that were already current, then there's far fewer slots available for new cases, and therefore they don't move the visa bulletin as much, right? So generally speaking, when we see the sort of situation we have at the moment where there are some embassies that are behind, that are building up a bit of a backlog, even though they're good embassies, then that indicates that the visa bulletin has been a bit too fast for those embassies. And therefore it would be a bit slower in the next month. That's what I told people a month ago. I was correct. That's what happened. We saw only a small increase in the regions. And it feels that way again to me, I have to say. So we may see another small jump, not a big jump. Can I inform Mr. USA President Joe Biden to do justice to the injustice done to the winners of 2020, 2021 diversity? Yeah, it's a good idea. I'll phone him. When I get off this live, though, I'll give him a call and tell him to personally get involved, because I'm sure he's got nothing better to do than to get involved in that, right? Okay, case number is 38. 38, okay, good. So it's an incredibly low number without a region. So I will now have an angel killed in your name. Let's see. What do you think about Algeria based on the latest statistics? Is there a chance for case number 70 or 80K? Thanks in advance. Okay, so case number of 70 or 80K in Algeria or any country in Africa has some risk. And so the question you're really asking is, is the region going to go to that case number? I don't know for a fact, but that's in the risky range. Okay, I think the risky range starts at around about 70,000. So we'll have to wait and see what happens. Obviously, the way they're working right now is issuing enough visas for them to meet the targets, right? So we're not going to see very, very high numbers going current. That's for sure. Good evening. Which case number can you say Nairobi get to in AF region since they're now backlogged? Can they get to 76K? 76K, same question. That's in a risky range. It's not about Nairobi. It's not about Algeria. It's about, do they have enough selectees with cases less than 70,000 to actually issue all of the visas that they need to issue in Africa? Yeah, they do. So if we see them going above 70,000, it will only be because of bad performance of some of the other embassies. But, we have to see really bad performance, which we're not really seeing at the moment, in order to drive those numbers, much higher. Okay. No predictions for this bulletin. Yeah, another question about Nairobi. So Nairobi obviously is, safer at 58K than at 76K. So 2 questions there, but otherwise the same comments, right? 12K Nepal, when can we expect? Towards the end of the year, probably around about July is probably going to be, the sort of the earliest you would get interviewed, maybe August or September even. Okay. What about 37K Egypt? Cairo for interview. I am MVC now. Everybody is MVC before they're scheduled, right? So you don't need to tell me you're MVC if you're not scheduled, right? Because everybody is at MVC. There's not a status. That's just the beginning of the game, right? It's like being on the Go thing in Monopoly, if you've ever played that game. What about 37K Egypt? Well, it's a low case number, but we have to see Egypt, Cairo in particular, has been slow in their 2NL, so we have to see a big improvement from them. We'll have to wait and see what happens. Case number is 38K from Africa. When do you think they'll send me a notification for interview? Well, it depends on which embassy you're at. If you're going to ask about a case number that's low like that, and if you haven't already had the interview scheduled, then it's probably because you're at an embassy that is backlogged. So it would be helpful if you would tell me which embassy it is. So if you're in Addis, for example, then you may never get to 38K, right? They may never get there. If it's Monrovia, for example, then they've already scheduled numbers higher than 38,000. So, it depends which embassy you're at. There's very different experience from different embassies, right? If you were at Nairobi, by the way, Nairobi is probably going to issue in that number range. They'll issue 2 NLs in next month that will exceed that number. That's what Nairobi will do, right? Okay. Do you think EU visa bulletin will reach my case number 21,000? Yes, I've produced a video that explains very carefully why I have certain, sort of number ranges that I consider safe, and EU 21,000 is absolutely safe in terms of that case number. In terms of your embassy, it may be less safe, but the number itself will go current, right? Lots of questions about will my number will go current. Any sort of good questions here? Rangoon embassy, I don't think much about Rangoon. It's not a very big embassy. So you can have a look at Zarthisius's data and see how they're doing. But it's not a big embassy, right? So when you have such a small embassy like that, they might have just a handful of cases being scheduled. And you might think that's a problem, but actually it's not really a problem because they can issue a lot of 2NLs for 1 month, a lot being maybe 20 or 30, and all of a sudden they will have interviewed everyone they need to interview. It's that's how it goes at some of these embassies, right? If a Guatemalan is deported to Mexico under Title 42, will that keep them from getting approved after being selected? No. So you were deported under Title 42 because Title 42 it doesn't, isn't in operation right now. No, that wouldn't stop you getting approved. But contrary to what the right-wing politic lunatics would like us to believe, the border really isn't open. It's not like you can just wander in and carry on with life. It's not an easy path at all coming through that border. So, if you're Guatemalan and you feel you have, some sort of case to claim asylum, then you can do that, but do it through, through one of the border entry points, ideally, right? Because I don't know, Americans are freaking out about illegal entries. I've got a whole thought process about that, but I won't go into it right now. Sujal says, hope you're doing well. Great. My question, I'm from Nepal. My case number is 12. Yeah, I think you already asked, right? And I think I already covered that. What's the best thing to do when you don't have resources to travel with all your family? Okay, great question. So it's very difficult for me living in a fortunate country and coming from a fortunate country to empathize with people that might think the costs of flying to America are prohibitive, right? And so it's I understand the cost of bringing a family might be difficult for some people, but here's what I would say. The DV lottery process is the simplest, fastest way to get a green card. When you get your visa, you're given a period of 6 months to enter the USA after that point. And what I would suggest to someone who's coming from a very poor country where they feel they can't afford to take all of the family is somehow get all of the family to the interview and pay the $330 for each of the family members, right? Get them that visa. Then the principal applicant needs to get his or her butt on a plane, get to America and get a job, right? And by getting a job, you will very quickly be able to save up the money to bring the rest of the family, to pay for air tickets and that sort of thing, to bring the rest of the family, right? So, and you've got 6 months. So I would be going to my interview. I would be, coming to America, working 1 or 2 jobs or 3 jobs, whatever it takes, right, to save the money and bring the family across. I would be living like as cheaply as possible. I'd be living with a host if possible, or something, or a friend. Be careful with every penny you spend. Save as much money up as you can, and then bring the family. And why am I saying that? Well, it's because if you say, okay, I can't afford to bring the family, so I won't even process them through the visa process, and I'll bring them later. You have to understand it takes years to bring them later. Years, right? Your family will be split up for years. And that's really not a good position to be in, right? It's also more expensive to sponsor them through other channels. So you'll be spending more money in the long run. You're going to be apart for several years, right? And that's because you thought it was too expensive to buy the flight tickets and everything else, right? So do whatever you have to do to get the $330 together per person. Get all the family their visas. That's the first step, and then get your butt over to America. You can save, you can save $1,000 in a week or two, right? You can, and a air ticket will probably be about $1,000, right? And some people will say, "Oh, that's too hard." Look, come to the right area. Go and get yourself 1 or 2 jobs. Work a day job and a night job. You've got no, there's nothing that says you need to come over here and start sitting in bars and spending money and watching TV. Like, don't do any of that. For the first 6 months of your time in America, your job is to save as much money as possible, to bring your family and to make sure you've got a deposit on an apartment and that sort of thing, so that you can provide some comfort for your family. That's your job, right? That's going to be the best thing. It's not going to be easy, but that's the immigrant's choice sometimes, and that's what you have to do. Okay, so that would be my advice. If ACRA doesn't have the capacity, why don't they inform KCC to transfer cases in ACRA to embassies willing to accommodate those cases? It's a good question. So ACRA does have the capacity, right? This is the frustrating thing. Let me show you something. It's not that they don't have capacity, it's that they're spending their capacity on other things, right? That's basically what's going on there. Let me move this across, and then, right, let me show you something here that will make this point clear, right? Present, share screen, entire screen. Okay. All right, so I'm going to show you the monthly. So you can go on this website at any time. It's travelstate.gov. I just Googled the words monthly statistics, right? And you come to this page, and you can scroll down to the latest report. IV, that's immigrant visa issuances by post and visa class. So we can look up ACRA in this chart here, and we look at DV. And we can see that for the month of January, they did 17 issuances, which is probably about 10 cases, maybe 11 cases or something. In ACRA, the derivative rate is kind of low in ACRA. So they did 17 visas, right? But the very same embassy that is complaining they can't fit in the DV cases, here's what they did for IR. 350, 600. About 600 visas were issued for immediate relative. It's not that they don't have the capacity. They have the capacity to issue 600 IR visas, and they chose to only give the capacity to issue 17 in January. That's their choice. It's simple choice, right? Okay. So we're clear about ACRA. ACRA has the capacity; they just choose not to use it in the way that we would want them to use it, right? The second part of your question is, well, why don't they push that workload to other embassies? Why don't they allow KCC to schedule? Well, KCC and the government believe that it's not good to have people moving around and moving, workload from embassy to embassy to embassy. So they believe that if you live in Ghana and ACRA is your embassy and ACRA chooses not to interview you, then that's your bad luck. That's what their belief is, right? That's just unlucky for you. That's exactly what they think. They have procedures written out that says people should only interview in the places where they live. Now, to some extent, I understand why they say that, because if they were to have people moving all over the place, crossing borders for interviews and everything else, it creates some level of hardship and risk for those people, and they don't want to be responsible for that. But still, it's fairly cruel in my mind to not allow some people who can move to move, right? And so, this is why I've been warning about this for several months. Don't get stuck in AV status at bad embassies like ACRA. And so many of you, unfortunately, ignored my warnings. And now with case numbers under 45,000, you're probably stuck at an embassy that's never going to interview you, and your chance is gone. So I'm sorry if that's happened to you, but that's exactly what's going to happen to a lot of people. Okay, let me... and on the same thing, is there any good news coming in for ACRA Ghana? I haven't seen any good news, and you can see why. They're putting all of their effort into the wrong place, right? Okay, let me just put this back so I can see it better. Right, let me choose another question here. AF59K from Cameroon. Yeah, lots of questions about is there hope. I'm going to try and ignore those sort of questions now. Mr. Simon, as the principal applicant, I have a baby on the 27th of February, and my case number is AF59K. My embassy is Dakar, Senegal, is performing well. So when can I add the baby? Does he need a passport now? Right, you need to unlock your DS260 now, and on your own DS260s, on that of the parents, right? If there's two parents, you would unlock the DS260 for both of those. You unlock for both of those and add the baby to your forms. You then also create a DS260 for the baby. You won't have a passport immediately, obviously, and so what you're going to do is you're going to use one of the parents' passport numbers for the baby. And that's okay. That can be changed later. You can change that at the interview. But you do need to unlock and create the DS260 for the baby and update your own DS260s. You need to do that now. And you're not current yet, so you have an opportunity to do that now. It's easiest to do it now rather than wait until you're current. Okay? Okay. Casablanca didn't send 2NL for April. Is that normal? No, it's not. It's not normal. And in theory, what they could do, for example, is they could take a very large number in the next month, and they could even move some of those around a little bit. But I don't know what they'll do. We'll have to wait and see. It wouldn't be normal for KCC to then schedule cases in March for April. Right, that wouldn't be normal. That's not how KCC operate. But maybe Casablanca could take some May interviews that will be scheduled next month and move them into April interviews. That's possible. Okay. Your number is AF 99700 Kathmandu Embassy. Well, what can I do to increase my chance for interview? I'm sorry, Mohammed, but the reality is you're probably never going to get current, right? If your number really is AF 99700, your case number is way too high. You've got extreme risk, and it's never going to get current. So I'm afraid you'll have to wait and see. But I don't think you're going to get an interview at all. And there's nothing you can do to increase that chance. It's because your case number is high. It's way too high, right? Okay. KDU has sent 2NLs to all the current. Does that mean that they will consider a decent jump in the next VB? No, that's what they're supposed to do. That's all. That's what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to keep up with the visa bulletin pace and send 2NLs to all of the people that are current, right? Now, does it mean there'll be a decent jump? I don't know what you mean by a decent jump, right? But yes, there'll be a jump for Nepal in the next visa bulletin. How much that will be, we'll have to wait and see. Okay. Okay. Let's see if there's any interesting questions. Will there be a chance for scheduling AF35? Okay. Same sort of question as everyone else, right? So again, you can look at Zarthisius's website and you can see where they're at, right? You can do that yourself. You know, by all means do that. Oh, that's Sajal again. Sajal, stop asking the same question. That's kind of annoying and frustrating for everybody, right? Please. Did you see any of the high case numbers? The file was processed like 100K or 90K. Yes, I've seen cases over 100K who've been told that their DS260 is processed. Now, there won't be many people like that because someone with a case number, and it's not that they haven't been processed, it's that they don't know about it. If you imagine you've got case number 105,000 or something, you probably already know that there's almost no hope for your case. If you don't know that, then you probably think, well, it's going to be a long time, so why am I going to email KCC and ask about my status, right? Those first two thought processes are perfectly logical. And so we don't have a high volume of people at over 100,000 in Africa that can say, yeah, my case is processed. But I promise you, there are cases over 100K where their cases are processed, which was a complete waste of everybody's time because those cases are not going to get current. But nevertheless, that's how the process works because it's not based on case number. They do not process DS260s based on case number. They process them, or they open them at least, in the order in which those cases are submitted. But if you've got case number 105,000 and you submitted your DS260 on May 10th or something of last year, so very early, and you got processed very quickly, there is nothing you can do except wait until your case number becomes current. And if your case number never becomes current, which is very likely, there's nothing you can do about it. Just because you submitted your DS260 early doesn't help you at all. Okay. I'm from Algeria, living in UAE with AF 2024 115K. If Africa goes current, Is it possible to get a chance for an interview? Africa won't go current, guys. You have to understand it's not going to go current. I mean, let me answer the question another way. If Africa went current, then yes, that's what it means. It means they can interview at any range. But try and understand, there are 55,000 people selected in Africa, and there are 24,000 visas, right? So over 30,000 people out of the 55,000, over half are not going to get scheduled, or won't get a visa. Rather, some of them will get scheduled, but many of them won't get a visa. About half of them won't get a visa. So, and who shouldn't get an interview? Who is not supposed to go first, right? The highest case numbers are not supposed to get an interview. They are there in reserve. It's like a soccer team. You've got 11 players playing soccer, and you have a couple of reserves. Unless someone gets injured from your first 11, you don't pick the people on the reserve bench, do you? Right? So if your case number 115,000, you were always a reserve, right? You were not supposed to play in the main game. And you were only there in case something disastrous went wrong in Africa that meant they went through the numbers very, very quickly. And so I'm sorry they don't make this clear, but you were never going to get an interview. It's as simple as that, really. Can a mother play the diversity visa along with her grandchildren? If yes, what documents are needed for interview? No, a mother cannot do that. Parents can bring their children under 21, but a grandmother cannot bring their grandchildren. Right? That's not okay. You can't do that through DV Lottery. So no, and the path to do that is very, very long-winded, very slow. It's not DV Lottery. That's not how DV Lottery works. DV Lottery only covers parents and unmarried single children under 21. Right? That's all it covers. Durga, during the DV interview, I was told it will go for administration process. Visa not yet issued. What does it mean? Okay, what it means is you went to the interview, and for some reason they were not prepared to issue your visa straight away. They might have concerns. They might want to do more background checks. They might ask you to fill out a DS-5535. They might ask you to supply documents that you should have presented in the first interview, but you failed to do so. There's various reasons why they might have a concern, and there might be a delay, right? Some of those reasons you can control by being properly prepared for the interview. Some of those reasons you can't control. They're just going to do those additional background checks for whatever reason, right? And they won't necessarily tell you the reason. Okay, so you just have to wait until the administrative processing is completed. That's all you can do. Okay. Okay. I wish to find out if playing the DV Lottery with a legally adopted niece or nephew can jeopardize his chances of getting the visa if selected. The trick there, or the important point there, is when was that legal adoption finalized, and is it a legal adoption? In many countries, adoption is pretty easy to do within family members, let's say, but the paperwork is not exactly, trustworthy, shall we say. So, in some countries, it might be culturally very normal for you to look after a niece or a nephew or something and just have them as part of your family. And so then if you were to win the DV Lottery, obviously you would want to take that niece or nephew. However, they're not entitled to go unless you have legally adopted them. And you have to have legal adoption papers that are at least 2 years before you go to interview. At least 2 years older. You must have legally adopted that child 2 years before the day of your interview, right? At least. So what you can't do is enter the lottery, win the lottery, including the niece and nephew, and then scramble to get the legal adoption papers. That wouldn't work. And in fact, it could get you disqualified from the whole thing, right? So you must only include legally adopted nieces, nephews, or anything else, if you adopted them way before the entry date, so probably a year or so before the entry date, which would then give you a 2-year sort of window of time before the interview date. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Can AF rise above 50K? Yeah, probably a little bit. We'll see. Done that one. Let's see. From Europe, case number is 18,600. When to expect interviews in embassy? Right, so it depends where you are, right? Not all embassies are the same. If you're in Turkey, for example, it's going to be quite a bit of time before they get to that number. But that number is probably going to go current next month, which in most embassies around Europe would mean that you would get an interview in May. So assuming your DS-260 was processed because you submitted it early enough, there was nothing complicated about your case, then you'll probably get an interview in May in most embassies around Europe. Okay. Do I know why Dakar didn't send 2NLs? No, I don't know. I don't, but again, I'm sure we could look at the, let me just do that actually. Let me have a look at the stats. Just go check. I won't show you this unless, yeah, so Dakar did in January, they had 140, 250, about 260 IR visas, that's immediate relative visas issued, to 38. So about 9 to 1, 38 DV, right? So they're focused on IR visas. They firstly give their capacity to IR. That's what's going on there. Okay. All right. A few more questions. Let's do a few more. Let's see. I have to scan through these questions to make sure they're not repeats and that they're not the same old question over and over again from different people. Okay. Case number is 68K from Morocco, currently in Qatar as resident. Yeah, you have a chance. You'll have to wait and see, but you have a chance, right? Case number 40,000, just over 40,000 from Nairobi. Is the embassy backlog? Can they issue 2NLs this month, reaching that figure? DS-260 is processed. Nairobi is a pretty good embassy right now. They're doing the best they can. They have issued 2NLs up to about 34,000. So yes, they're a little bit backlogged, right? And but they're one of the embassies that I look to say, okay, when the visa bulletin went from 40,000 to 45,000, before it went to 45,000, I was pointing out that cases that embassies like Nairobi were getting a little bit backlogged, and therefore they shouldn't go too far with the visa bulletin as a whole, right? And same sort of thing is in place now. So Nairobi is doing a lot of interviews. They're doing the best they can, and they'll probably get to 40,000 scheduling next month. So you'll probably have your interview in May, I would imagine, maybe June, but more likely May. But then if the visa bulletin goes to, let's say, 50,000 next month, right, then there's going to be all the cases between 40 and 50,000 that will still want an interview later on. And the DS-260 completion and processing rate is maturing still, which means there are cases from low case numbers that suddenly become ready to be interviewed. And so all of those cases that are backlogged or now that are coming from DS-260 processing all have to be scheduled first before they can get to the higher case numbers, right? That's why the visa bulletin probably won't move very much in next month in Africa. Okay. Okay, CL told us at the interview that our visa has been approved, but my wife's status shows issued, while mine is still AP. Is there anything to worry about? We're from Cameroon. It's probably nothing for you to worry about. When you say you're in AP, if it has the words administrative processing, then that is literally nothing to worry about, because that's almost as good as issued. The type of AP that sometimes happens is a refused scenario where it's got the long text, and actually that's 221G, which is what most people think of as being administrative processing. But if you see the words administrative processing on your case, then it simply means they're printing your visa, and you just need to be patient, okay? Because it will come. So good luck to you there. Can you show us what a 2NL looks like? All a 2NL is an email. You get an email, first of all, that says, go and check your status on the ESC page. It has no information on there. When you go into the ESC page, which is the page you originally checked where it says, congratulations, you have been selected, right? That selected letter has now been replaced by your interview appointment letter. Okay, and when you get your 2NL, you'll know what that is. But you can always, if you feel you've missed the email, and some people do, some people don't notice the email, or it goes to their junk folder or something. You can always log into your ESC page anytime and see whether the letter there is the selected letter or has been replaced by the 2NL, which gives your appointment. Okay, so that's worth doing probably once a month, just in case you miss the email. Okay. Okay. Case number AF49K processed. I unlocked my DS260 in February. Is this will cause delay, and my interview location is Riyadh? No, you're processed. So you unlocked it, but you're saying it's processed, right? So if it was processed, it won't cause any delay because you're processed, right? So relax, you'll be fine. How much money do I need to have in my bank account to prove at the interview that I will not be a burden to the EU region? Typically around about $10,000 US per person, typically. And I've been advising people about DV lottery for 10 years. And 10 years ago, $10,000 was worth a lot more in America than it is today, right? In every country, it's the same thing, right? Inflation does that to money. And I've been saying $10,000 for all those 10 years. So I'm a little bit nervous about the $10,000 number. It might sound a lot to you, but it's actually not a lot in America. I remember spending at least $40,000 in the first month I was here. So having $10,000 in your bank account per person, that's not a lot of money. But that's the sort of amount of money that they will want to see. And if you can't show at least that, if you're a couple and you haven't got 20,000 US dollars, then you should probably get an I-134, okay, which is an affidavit of support, okay? Okay, something in Russian there I can't read. So please speak English on the questions and you've got a better chance of getting them answered. Okay. My wife is primary winner. Can I get into America without taking her to set things up, and then she will catch up with me? No, Mohammed, you can't do that. If the principal applicant, the winner, has to enter either with the family or before the family, right? And so your wife and you, for example, could enter the USA, and your wife could immediately leave while you stay there to work or do whatever you have to do, but you can't enter before your wife in your scenario, right? Because she's the winner. So so you have to figure that out. You can't go first. That's an absolute rule. Okay. My case was ready for interview, but yet I didn't receive any notification letter. What could be the problem? It's probably your embassy. If you had told me your embassy and your case number, etc., I could have given you more information. Maybe you should put that in there. But that's almost certainly what the problem is, right? Your embassy is not up to date. There's almost no embassies in Africa that are fully up to date. I think Monrovia, actually, let me just look at the data real quick. I think Monrovia is probably about the highest case number for Africa. Yeah. Africa is although it's current case number 45,000, there are no cases at 45,000 that have been scheduled, and I think Monrovia therefore is about the highest case number. I could check that in the data, but I think that's it. Okay. My host is not able to provide I-134 and IRS transfers. I have got them from a friend. Is it okay to retain my host? Yeah, the host and the person filling in I-134 can be two different people, right? The host is simply where you're planning to stay for the first few months, and the person who's supporting you giving an I-134 can be a different person. So that's absolutely fine. No problem with that. Okay. Hello, sir. Do you think that the majority of those selected have been released and are ready for interview, or is the majority not prepared for the interview and have not been summoned yet? The majority have not been summoned yet, as you put it. They have, we got the numbers. There's no need to be wondering about this. They have, let's see. Let's make sure that's up to date. Yeah. So right now, oh, I should check that picture as well. Oh, okay, hang on. There are some cases. 40. No, it's still 42,000. So there are, as of right now, as of last night, Zarthesius updated his data. So 34,071 people are scheduled, with 54 cases where there's going to be another few cases. So just over 34,000 people have been scheduled. We will see them schedule 70,000 people, right? That will be about the number they get to. There were 140,000 people selected. So we're about 25% of the way in right now. We're never going to get to 100%, obviously. They're never going to schedule all 140,000 people. They're only going to schedule about half of them. So you could say, you can look at it and say, well, there are 75% of people who've not been scheduled, and about 1/3 of those people will receive a 2NL, right? So your chance of receiving a 2NL at the moment is about 1 in 3. But the chances are not the same for everybody. The chances are much better for people at lower case numbers than they are at higher case numbers, right? That's basically the way it's supposed to work. Okay. All right. I could have shown you that, but oh well. Okay. Let's just say. Is there any way we can know until which case number add is accomplished? Please inform us of the number. You can, and I'm surprised you're asking the question, really, but let me show you the answer. So, in case people don't understand how to do this, let's do this again. Where's my StreamYard? There, right? Okay. So this is going to be, I've shown this so many times, I don't know. But okay, so there's a couple of things that you can do. In this website here, which is Zarthesius's website, he updates this every Friday night, right? So this information is accurate as of last night. Now, there's a couple of things you can do. You can type in the embassy that you're interested in seeing, and you will see all of the case numbers, and you can see them. You can see them by region, or see if there's anyone from EU, OC. Yeah, there's a case there, a single case from OC, SA. Right, there's basically one case from OC, and the rest are from Africa. And you can see that there are cases scheduled up to about 14,000 or so. Right. Now, if you want to know the precise number, you shouldn't need to know this, but if you want to know the precise number, you can download the file. You can open the file in a spreadsheet. Open, yeah. So Zarthesius very helpfully publishes the precise data. If you're not happy with looking at the picture there, you can do what I'm doing now. So I'm showing you what you do, right? You could go in there and you can say, okay, I want to deselect that, and I want to look at Addis, right? And it's only going to show you there for the cases that are ready. And if we scroll right down, we can see precisely that there's that OC case, 194. I said there was one OC case. And the highest case number that is scheduled in Addis right now is 14214, right? Now, and you can see all the rest of the cases. You can see a case here that's a transfer out of Addis. It's interesting. Somebody is playing smart. You can see some have been issued. You can see refused 221G. You can see the status of all the case numbers. So, any of you can do the same thing. You can type in the embassy you're interested in seeing, or you can go and have a look at this data and have a real good look at the data, and you can see, exactly what's going on. And again, I'll just show you, just scroll to the bottom with slightly bigger font there. There you go, 14214. That's the highest case number that is scheduled from Africa in Addis, and they got their 2NL in the week that ended February 16th, right? February 16th is the Friday of that week, so that's when they got their 2NL. So you can do that for any embassy. You can do that for the whole region. You can have a look at this data, and you could say, for example, I want to select. If we have a look at, actually, let's just select all for a moment. Let's have a look at Africa, and we'll have a look at. We have to turn off certain statuses. Let's say I don't want to see a status of. Hang on a second. Why am I seeing that? I've only got Addis selected. That's why. Okay. So your holes are a status of none, and NVC means not scheduled yet. So if I change that filter and then I go right to the bottom of this list, we can see the highest case number that is scheduled in each region, right? So I can filter by region and say, okay, I want to see Africa only. Let's have a look in Africa. So the highest case number is at Monrovia, as I mentioned earlier, 42198. So no embassy managed to go higher than 42198 in terms of scheduling. If you then filter further, you can filter on a little bit more. Let's go here. Why am I not scrolling up to the top? Oh, that's interesting. It's misbehaving. Wouldn't normally do that. Oh, that's weird. Huh. Something weird about the presentation, I think. Let me just pop that back open and see if that fixes it. Yeah, it did. Okay, so what you can also do is you can say, okay, I want to look at a particular embassy. Let's look at Nairobi. I mentioned that they were about 34,000 and something. They're a little bit higher now, so 35,914. So that's the highest scheduled case in Nairobi, 35,914. And they also got that in the February 16th week, right? So 35,914, that's in Nairobi. Now, that means that Nairobi have got to schedule cases between 35,914 and 45,000. That's just backlog. That's before they increase the visa bulletin, right? And they are doing very well. If you look at the number of 2NLs they got by date, if we say, okay, how many did they get in on February 16th, right? We can see they got 207. I don't know if you can see that, but in the bottom left-hand corner, I can see that's 207 2NLs that they got at that time, right? Which is about 400 people. So in that week, they got 200 2NLs, right? And you can see the same data on online as well. Actually, because I get complaints, let me just show some of the other regions here. We'll turn off the consulate, select all. We'll leave the status as was, and let's just have a look at the other regions quickly. Okay, so for Asia region, we can see that the highest case number is 7186. Considering Asia is at 7,200, that means that there are cases almost up to date. So Asia is pretty much not backlogged, apart from maybe there's some backlog at some individual embassies. But as a whole, they're not really backlogged, whereas Africa have got a little bit more of a backlog problem as a whole. In EU, who are now, we would expect to see the highest case number of 17.5, and we see 17.494, right, which is at DHB embassy, and we've got one case that's in transit. We've got Warsaw and Frankfurt, right? So you can see the data. You're seeing that, I would imagine. I'm just gonna, let me just take off this. I'm just gonna take that off for a second, actually. Yeah, I don't want to lose my place. Just so you can see more of the screen. OC, let's have a look at OC. Highest case number scheduled, 1243, almost right up to the number. And if we do the same thing with SA region, South America, come over here and we can see 2397, again pretty close to the current number. So in general, most of the regions, just at a very high level, most of the regions are doing pretty well, apart from Africa, which is a little bit behind. And there's not a great deal of embassies that are right up to date in Africa. So Africa is the one that I think is probably not going to have the biggest jump, because they're already not really coping with the work they've got, right? So hopefully that's making sense. Okay, so that answered your question, I hope. Not long for the 2025 results. Yeah, it's about 60 days, 2 months. So just over 60 days, I think. From Cameroon, 69K, is it a good number? It's okay. It's a little bit at the risky end, but not too bad. What's going on with DV 2020 after the judge ruled that they should issue them visas? Right, 1010. The government appealed. So we won that case, right? And those cases for 2020 and 21. And then the government appealed that decision, which is their right to do. There was then an appeal hearing that was held about a year and a half ago. And the three judge panel from that hearing have not given us their decision yet. They've taken a full year and a half to think about that. I don't know why they're spending so much time thinking about it, but they've not given us that answer. So that's what we're waiting for, right? Which is right what I said right at the beginning. Okay. So fax it in non-spec English. Well, sorry, I'm non-spec whatever you spec. So, so sorry, you've got to ask me questions in English. If someone can get a baby after registering for DV 2025, somehow, if you win DV, can you get the visa for the baby? Yeah, absolutely. Wendy, it's always possible to add the baby. There's a way to do it, depending on the timing of your interview and when the baby's born and all that sort of thing. But there's always a way to add the baby, okay? Got my wife's date of birth wrong within form 260 and then corrected it after I found out. And then I sent it. Does it cause any problem? No. I mean, your wife might be annoyed with you for not knowing her birthday, but it's not going to be a problem for your visa process, right? It's more about your wife. Okay, so I already have 1 month Airbnb booked. I'm just wondering if it's possible to rent an apartment without a job using the savings that I have, around $20K. It's sort of possible. I did exactly what you're talking about, right? That I had cash in the bank, but I had a lot more than $20K. So I was able to say to the gentleman who was leasing the property, I said, look, what do you want? You want 3 months deposit? You want 6 months deposit? You want a year? Do you want me to pay for the year up front? I could have done all of those things because I had the cash in the bank, right? At $20K, you don't have enough money to pay all of that. So you're a bit of a risk. So I would say that you're probably better off in a temporary situation like an executive hotel or an Airbnb, at least for the first month or 2 months while you get a job. And you'll be careful with the $20K because that's not a lot of money in some senses. if you've got no work at all. It depends where in the country you go. In some places that money will last longer than other places, right? But I can tell you where I live, that wouldn't last very long at all. So there you go. Okay. A friend of mine is boilermaker in one of the mining company in Ghana. No formal education. In case he wins, what documents does he need as proof of his profession? He won't be able to qualify. Even if he wins, he can't qualify as a boilermaker. That's not a skill that would qualify. Let me show you that actually. So this is an interesting question, even though it's not going to be a great answer for your friend. So there's a web site called ONET Online, onetonline.org. And the rules of the DV lottery says that if you don't meet the education requirements, the other way of meeting the requirements is by having a job at a certain level. You've got to have at least 2 years experience within the past 5 years at that job, right? But not all jobs qualify. You have to have a certain level. So let's say you're a manager, for example. I'm just going to give an example. Let's say managers all other, right? So regulatory affairs manager, right? So then we look at a specific job, and in the job description, it gives you an idea of the sort of titles that might be there. And then it gives some of the tasks and technology skills that someone would have if they did that job. And then it will say which job zone and which SVP range. And these are the two important things you have to know. And you have to have a job that has a minimum of job zone 4 and an SVP range of 7 or 7 to under 8, right? So in other words, it's got to have those two conditions, right? Whatever job you do has to be rated at that level. And those jobs tend to be managerial, supervisory jobs, professional in some way. They tend to be like that. So your friend is a boilermaker. Let's see if that's in there. A boilermaker. All right. Now, if we scroll down, so it will have the tasks that those people do, right? What technology tasks they have, and then what job zone and SVP range. And the title, or the job zone rather, for a boilermaker is job zone 3. That's not enough. And SVP is 6 to 7. That's not enough. So even if your friend is selected, he should not proceed, because he's just going to waste his money. He can't possibly pass the interview if he hasn't got the education required, and his job really is as a boilermaker. Then he's not going to pass the interview. Now, if he was a manager in a company that manages other boilermakers, for example, he manages, right? Maybe that would be maybe he would be able to pass the interview. But if he was a manager, then he would be getting more money than the typical boilermaker. He would show a career path to show how he gained that experience, and he would have some different technology skills and so on that would differentiate him from a day-to-day boilermaker, right? That's how you look up to see whether a job can pass or not. And you can put any job in here you like, and it will come up with some examples. So let's say an architect, which is what I do, but software architect. Let's say architect, database architects, computer systems engineers. That's like me, basically. So would I be able to pass? Yep, I would get a job zone 4 and a 7 to 8, right? And it describes in this experience requirements box why this job meets the requirement and other jobs don't. So most of these occupations require a 4 years bachelor's degree, but some do not. Considerable amount of work-related skill, knowledge, or experience is needed for these occupations, right? So it gives you an idea why. Now let's we'll put in one more here. Oh, I can see I'm not showing the damn the thing. So let me just go back to Boilermaker here. I'm sorry, I did a lot of talking there without checking whether you could even see. So Boilermaker, we're on the ONET Online link. Boilermaker, and you have to come down here, job zone 3, and SVP range of 6 to 7. That's what I was talking to when I was just saying, and I'm showing you the page. I thought I was showing you the page, but I wasn't showing you the page, so I apologize for that. Let's have a look at someone else, a carpenter. So just whatever job you have, carpenter, and you have a look, and you say, yeah, I'm a carpenter, but maybe I'm more like a construction laborer, and it had bright outlook there, right? Because they need those sort of workers. But that's only a job zone 2 job with a low SVP range, so you can't qualify for DV lottery through that. Let's say you're a car mechanic, right? Car mechanic. So retail car repair, yeah, let's say, well, a technician and mechanic, right? Automotive technician and mechanic, job zone 3. So although you need some preparation, that preparation and skill set is normally gained on the job. You're not sort of being professionally trained for a career path, and so that job doesn't qualify. So that's how you do that. You have a look at those things, and you could say, maybe you're a translator, right? Interpreter and translator. Now, a translator is kind of interesting one. That's job zone 4, right? That one would pass. So maybe you're a translator, maybe you're a professional translator, but it can't be like you are a car mechanic during the day and you translate stuff during the evening as a hobby or as a part-time job. You would have to be a professional translator and show that your income that supports you is from being a translator. So you would be expected to prove that at the interview with documentation. So you'd show your curriculum vitae or your resume, as they call it in America. You'd show your pay slips showing that you earn this money from this company, and it ties up with your CV. There's various things you can do. Perhaps you took some professional training that helped you get this job, or you've had some training at the job, and maybe you show certificates of completion of some of that training that is pertaining that job that you're doing now, right? There's various things you can provide as proof if you need to qualify through work experience. But the first thing to do is check whether your job even qualifies, because if your job doesn't meet the grade, the job zone 4 and the SVP range of 7 or above, then it doesn't matter how long you do that job, you're not qualifying, right? So I hope that's helpful for not only you, but for some other people that might be interested in that. Okay. Let me see if I can just take 1 or 2 more quick questions. We're about an hour here. So, dear sir, for green card holders, is time away from the United States during travel deducted from the 5-year period for obtaining citizenship? Yes, if you're away for more than 6 months. So if you're away for more than 6 months, that clock kind of resets. There's a whole formula for that. I don't want to get into it. That's not my area of expertise. But yes, you can affect your 5-year. You can make that 5 years last longer by being out of the country, out of the USA for too long. Yes, fundamentally. Okay. Okay. I see my friend. Job's in London today, so we'll get a taxi home from school. I'm trying to figure out my case number is 56K. That's not very helpful to me. I don't know what you're trying to say. You were asking me a question in a foreign language. You have to unfortunately ask the whole question. Okay, last question here. What's the meaning of the AVQ? So AV status is the status that you become once your case has been processed, the DS-260 has been processed, and you're current, right? So every month the visa bulletin is moved up a little bit, and KCC look at all the cases which have become, which are processed, DS-260, and have now become current, and they move those cases into the AVQ, right? And I created a video a few months ago that explains exactly how that queue works, because cases are added into that queue in a batch. numbered, ordered by number. They're added into that queue, and that happens month to month. But each month, though, as those numbers are being added into that queue, those cases are not reordered by later cases coming into the queue, right? So that means that you can get high case numbers that will go ahead of low case numbers, because the high case number entered the queue before the low case number that was added in a later month. And that's confusing to some people. And you really only see that when the embassy is backlogged. But we're about to see it in Addis. So in Addis Ababa, they've scheduled a case number 14,218. And so that is into the visa bulletin range where the cases went up to 22,000, right? So, and there's enough numbers between 14,000 and 22,000. There's enough cases that I don't think they can reach all of those 2NLs in a single month, which means that they've got to go through that AV status range from 14K to 22K, and they'll stop somewhere in between there, I believe. And so we will see a very clear indication that Addis is in that queue, AVQ position. And that was for cases that were DS-260 processed at the beginning of November, right at the beginning of November. So we'll see that happening this month in Addis. And then once they've got to above 22,000, which may be the next month after that, which will be for June interviews, then you'll see some low case numbers coming in from below. And that's how it works. And it will be a good demonstration. So I'm actually planning to do a video on that once we see that happening. Although I can tell you what's going to happen already. I know what's going to happen, but I'll explain it when we've got the actual data. I'll explain why it happened. Okay, and it'll be a little bit more clear that way. Okay, everybody, we'll call that a day. I think I've probably taken enough of your questions to keep you happy at the moment. If you have any questions that I didn't get to, please do ask them at britsimonsays.com. You can go and put your question there and I will answer it there. Okay, and other than that, for those that are waiting for TV 2025, good luck for you in a couple of months' time. And for those that are waiting for TV 2020 and 2021, who knows? Maybe we'll hear something soon. I certainly hope so. My fingers are crossed. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining me today. Bye-bye.